Recording in progress.
Welcome councillors, executive staff and members of the public watching to the Ordinary Council meeting of the 26th of May 2022. Start with the opening karakia read by myself today. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa painamu te moana, e huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, kuie tai kie. Welcome everyone. It's at this time acknowledge that His Worship the Mayor can't be with us today. He's still recovering in Christchurch Hospital, and I think it's appropriate that we pass on our thoughts and well wishes to Bruce for a good recovery, and also the best wishes and thoughts to his wife Jenny and their kids Hayden, Craig and Kylie and their partners and wider whānau at this time. I know all of our thoughts are with them, and I know that a lot of the members of our district have also expressed that view to us as individuals as well. So we pass on that collective thinking at this time to His Worship. Now call for any apologies for the meeting today, aside from His Worship the Mayor. There being none, no further apologies. Someone please move that the apology from His Worship be accepted and received. And if you can just, if you're in chambers, can you please just indicate with your name at the time of raising your hands? Councillor, is that Councillor Cogan?
Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Hart.
And Councillor Hart, thank you. All those in favour? Right. The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. The declarations of interest, the interest register has been circulated in Microsoft Teams to councillors, can be edited electronically, and there's also a hard copy on the council table this afternoon. If you have any matters that you need to amend in the interest register as a result of today's agenda, please do so, and please exclude yourself and take the appropriate measures to prevent any conflict of interest that may arise. Councillors or senior staff, are there any urgent items not on the agenda that need to be raised as part of this meeting?
Not from staff.
Nothing from councillors? Okay, we'll carry on then, thank you. And we move into the minutes of previous meetings. There are three lots of meeting minutes for us to receive and resolve that they're true and accurate records of the meetings held. We have the Ordinary Council meeting minutes of the 28th of April. We have the Extraordinary Council meeting minutes of the 5th of May and the Extraordinary Council meeting minutes of the 11th of May 2022. The minutes have been circulated. They're taken as read. No amendments have been notified. Is there any discussion or request for any further amendments? There being none, a councillor to move that the minutes, the three sets of minutes that I referred to and noted in the resolution be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meetings held.
So moved, Chair.
Moved Deputy Mayor Carruthers, seconded
I'll second it, James.
Councillor Neal. All those in favour?
Aye.
The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. And accordingly, I prove that my digital signature be added to the confirmed Ordinary Council meeting minutes of the 28th of April 2022, the Extraordinary Council meeting minutes of the 5th of May 2022, and the Extraordinary Council meeting minutes of the 11th of May 2022. We now had an administrative matter to deal with, and that is as a result of the changes in some of our committees and our terms of reference and council's procedures. We are, as council, obliged to receive committee meeting minutes. They've all been circulated via Microsoft Teams. They have all been independently, as part of the ordinary business of those committees, been received and resolved as true and correct records of those meetings. Our job here is to simply formally receive them at council level. I suggest that the best way forward is to approach all of the resolutions collectively, and I ask that someone move in that direction.
So move.
And move Deputy Mayor Carruthers and seconded Councillor Neal. All those in favour? Those against? The resolution's carried. Was there any discussion on any of those as part of receiving them today? No discussion. Thank you very much. I'm now wish a warm good afternoon to Chief Executive Simon Bastian, who's going to talk us through the 6th item on the agenda, the action list. Over to you, Simon.
Good afternoon, councillors, and Chair and Deputy Mayor. It's good to see everyone, most people back in chambers. It's a big step forward to getting back to normal. I'll take you through each individual action, and I'll open up questions at the end. Very, very pleased to announce the work of Lake Mary intersection has been completed. There is still an outstanding piece of work, which is obviously to do a grand opening with the school, and we'll coordinate that in due course. Requested that item was actually removed from the action list. Speed limit register review, as indicated previously, deferring the actual consultation process till after the annual plan is completed. I have already received some requests from the public for visiting speed limit changes, and I'm happy to take those as they come through, and I pass these on as part of a future submission. Ross Tony's Gardens, we have made some progress on the diversion. The initial rock has been installed. I'm visiting the site with our engineer next week to look at further progress. The lake level hasn't even come up to the discharge site since the start of summer, so there's plenty of rainfall capacity still, even with the rain that we've had. But the diversion looks like it'll be working, so finalising that piece of work. There's still large pieces of rock still to be sourced, and that's coming in as rock is made available from private contractors, which is free issue to the project. Back to Waitara and Council Headquarters, we have a presentation this afternoon in the confidential session regarding back to Waitara building. And I can update you on some progress regards to Council Headquarters in that session as well. Road maintenance, obviously we've seen some proactive work around the footpath program, which is fantastic, and that will continue. We will update the footpath presentation that was supplied probably 8 months ago and give an update in the near future. Requested that is also removed from the action list. There are some minor pieces of work, but the whole action is pretty well completed. Racecourse Development Subdivision. I'm pleased to announce also that we have made it to the negotiation phase, so we've gone through stage 1 and 2. So we have been working with the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. They've sent some key issues through to us in regards to our application that we'd like to work through. We have a workshop with them on the 7th of June. We have engaged Tony Joseph's Associates to be the liaison with us. They are also doing the Buller Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application, which they have also been successful at the same time. So having that common outcome or common contact person is really a pleasing IAF team. The gambling policy was supposed to come in May, will be now June. Hokitika Beachside, definitely will have a conversation with the key stakeholders closer to the time of development. We do need to talk to the so-called, I suppose, the developer of the sign to ensure that they're comfortable with making it a permanent without having to continually keep it updated. An LGNZ invitation, there was an invite out to all councillors on Monday. David Crothers, myself, and Councillor Martin met with both Susan Freeman Green and also the chair of LGNZ, Stuart Crosby. And we've circulated a response following that meeting into your papers today. And I just would like to pass over to Deputy Mayor Carruthers in terms of, and also open up to Councillor Martin in terms of the feedback.
Thank you, Simon. Excuse my voice, not functioning very well today. We had a very profitable meeting with Stuart and Susan, and we conveyed to them fairly clearly the views or the concerns expressed by some members of our council about our ongoing or future membership of LGNZ. And fair to say they'd come to us from a fairly bruising meeting earlier that day with Grey District Council, who had shared with them similar concerns. I think our meeting, from what they said, was a good deal more positive than it had been with the Grey group, and we told them that they needed to make it clear to us as a council why we should continue to be part of LGNZ. In other words, they needed to sell themselves to us. Without getting into too much detail, I think they did do that, and they made it very. And I came away personally with the strong view that right now would not be a wise thing for us to do to discontinue our association with LGNZ. It's much better to be inside the tent and to be able to influence certain processes that are going to have a very significant long-term effect on the local government sector and our council. Better to be in the organisation and having an ability to affect it. It also became clear, well, it was clear to us if it wasn't prior to the meeting, that LGNZ have a lot of services and expertise that we would not be able to access if we were not, if we didn't continue our membership. So, Latham, do you have anything to add to that? Just that's a very abbreviated summary. My strong recommendation to this council is that we remain a member of this organisation, and that we pay the invoice for the current year's subscription. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers. I'll open it up for any questions on any of the topics discussed today, the 10 items of action.
Thank you very much, Simon. We'll work through them one at a time, if that's all right. And the recommendation on the first is to remove it from the action list, if I heard correctly, and it is the Kaniari School Student Cycle Crossing. Any comment on that being removed? Well done, that is a great body of work completed. Any discussion on the speed limit kaupapa that's before us? Bearing in mind we also have Waka Kotahi joining us today for a presentation. No, we'll carry through. Ross Chinese Gardens, any comments on that action point?
Yes, Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
So did you manage to have a discussion around, like we talked about at the last meeting, around timelines with?
That's what the meeting on Tuesday or next week will be, because there's the challenge that they're having is sourcing the final piece of rock to complete it.
Yeah.
The design, the large rock has already gone in and it's stayed in its channel.
Yeah.
So it's just around how long it will take to get the remaining rock. I personally don't have any concerns that it will be completed in the near future, but I just need to talk to them directly in terms of the scope of work to finish, which I'll do a site visit on next week.
Sure, and who actually is liaising with them around, what the conditions around what the
So the
construction,
project manager from this council,
and they'll be ensuring that everything's
so we'll be visiting with them.
built and engineered.
Yes,
So,
correct.
okay, thank you.
Can that move to an orange light?
Sorry?
Can it move to an orange light instead of red?
It's just orange, red because it's 2020 was first raised. If council is happy, I'm happy to continue liaising the fact that we have a resource consent that's almost complete and actually remove it from the action list. Or would you rather keep it there until it's complete?
Yeah.
I think the feeling is we keep it on the action list. Moving through, are there any further questions in relation to the Ross Chinese Gardens? Yes, Paul.
Through the chair, there's no update on Kamara Gardens.
Yes, I can give you, it's actually not an action, but I can give you an update. So they have found a contractor. They requested that we review the contract on their behalf. We've declined that, but we have found them someone that can do that work for them, and they're very happy with that. So once that contract has been allocated, then they'll take it back to the committee for endorsement, and then potentially they will come to council for support. The big step is obviously finding someone to do the work, which sounds like they've found someone that can do that work for you.
Yeah, okay. Pardon my scepticism. Do they have any timeline this time?
It comes back to the appointment of the contractor and what they're able to achieve.
Sounds like we're spinning wheels again, but we shall see.
Yeah, if I can just follow on from that, like, from what I can gather, the contractor now that they are going to be using has actually, in the background, been and very consciously been involved in a lot of the discussions that they've been talking about to do with the Chinese Garden. So he's already got a fairly solid briefing of what needs to be done, which is really to their advantage. Yeah. So I would suggest that we will see some, yeah.
Definitely we could request a program of work and a timeline towards that.
Yes.
So they come prepared before coming in front of council.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That sounds like a good way forward. Just to clarify, when are they coming to council? When is it proposed?
They haven't come back to council yet for that. Denny, will you take that back to them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Through the chair, what are they coming back to the council for?
I would assume they're looking to source further funding.
So you want a program of work from the contractor now on what he's going to be doing?
Once I've appointed a contractor, just a program of work to complete the project.
To complete the project fully.
Makes sense that they can revisit that.
Okay. I mean, they've been through a lot of dough already. Here they are coming back again. That'll be interesting.
Any further discussion or questions on the Ross Chinese Garden action point? Okay, cool. We'll keep moving. Thank you. The item 4, headquarters in Pakiwatara. Any questions? We do have a report today in committee. business case timeline is tied into that report as well. Road maintenance action updates, any questions? It was suggested that that be removed, I think. And
Paul Davidson.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Just on the stamped concrete, is that like a standard option now that they're using in the CBD?
Correct. It's been previously stated.
Okay, what is the colour and the shape? Did that change at all, or have they picked a colour for it?
I would have to defer that question. We could come back to council in terms of if there's any. The challenge we have if you go changing a whole lot of colours will show quite a mismatch. Just got to make sure that where we go it doesn't conflict with the existing.
My point exactly, Simon.
Yes, no, we'll take that into account as required.
And also the shape and design, you know, that. And the other question I have is the contractors that are doing the one at the Mitre 10, are they the same contractors that did the one in Rebel Street?
I don't know. Might be worthwhile just checking with the transportation manager when he comes up a little bit later.
Sorry,
I think West Roads may be doing the one at Mitre 10.
I can't give you that now.
Sorry, don't have it.
Thank you.
I suggest both of those matters we pick up when we have the transportation manager with us as later part of the meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
Yep. So a couple of things there, and just to answer that question, yeah, because we did have some original Councillor Davidson conversation around with the concrete down on Rebel Street, because it had come with quite a very bright colour, white clearing.
It's actually softened quite a bit since asbestos.
Yeah, but we did talk about, you know, originally when that was happening, that it, you know, the colour could have been sort of, yeah, not
Glaring.
as so glaring on the eye, because it's extremely glaring. And I was sure that someone was actually going to go away and look into that.
In terms of for future work.
For the for any future work, that the colour doesn't stay that glaring white. Yeah, and that I know, speaking to quite a number of the Rebel Street businesses that some of us councillors have been talking to, was also a key one of the key things from them as well. Now, the other one that I also want to bring up about is the footpath program, and I think we will also see that clearly reflected a little bit further on today through the feedback from the survey. So the program of work, can I just have that re-explained to me? So I know that initially when we had conversations around the footpaths around our townships, and that there being concerns about, you know, the standard of them, then because I know that Samara Wright very happily helped us, you know, as far as, you know, when it comes to the scooters and stuff, that they're drivable, and that this is another thing that also has come up, which we'll see later on in the survey results, around still some real concerns around the footpaths. So I wouldn't want to see us not to take this off the list, because I'm quite keen sooner rather than later for us to have a discussion from someone in council around what's been completed so far, where they still intend to go. I know that someone within council was supposed to be coming out to the communities like the Ross community and talking to them a little bit more about, you know, those works and what was going to be happening, but to date, they haven't seen them down there.
So the Ross footpaths have been done. So there was
Yeah, but someone was going to come down from within council and speak to the Ross community group as well about the footpaths and, you know, what plans were in place with it, but also footpaths around Hokitika. Yeah, I would just like to know, because there seems to still be a lot of adversity out there with from people around the standard of the footpaths.
Yeah, so we're basing it on the priority work that we completed in terms of the audit. If you recall, going back quite some time ago, when we first presented, we did a full review of all the footpaths in the region, plus assessed in terms of priority. Some of that work has already been done and actually still ongoing. There's a limited budget plan which we can do in 1 year. So that program of work will be updated. So we have committed to council that the transportation manager will be in front of council every quarter just to give updates on all of these programs. So it doesn't need to sit on as an action. That'll come as part of future agenda items for council.
So when could we anticipate an update on?
We had a transportation update last month. The next one will be in July.
Okay, so at that one, are we able to have something sent out to us prior, just showing the works to date now that have been completed off the overall?
We can update the presentation. It was posed by Winnie, if you remember, when he presented one.
Yeah, that would be good.
Just mark it up the areas that have been completed.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogan. So just to clarify, there'll be an updated presentation on the status of the footpath progress, and that will come to a future council meeting as part of the Transportation Manager's update. Any discussion on the racecourse development?
Oh, yes. Great. Well done, Simon.
Almost there.
That's awesome.
Great.
Any discussion on the gambling policy and the harm assessment, sorry, the impact assessment? Any discussion on the Hokitika Beach sign, making it a permanent feature at the same time as installing the access ramps?
Yep.
And then the final matter, which does need direction from council, please, is the local government New Zealand membership. You've heard from Deputy Mayor Carruthers. You have received 2 written reports in relation to this matter in your teams as well. Is there any discussion to the contrary of the, or opinion to the contrary of the view put forward by Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
So just a couple more questions around that. When you guys had the discussion with them, was there a conversation around, you know, because we did talk about at the last meeting, the whole value for money back to councillors, and the disappointment we had in what initially was provided with their training, and because from the LGNZ perspective, in my opinion, you know, we are actually approving the funding, but the funding, from the way I see it, is more purposeful to council rather than council as a supporting agency for councillors.
With respect, Councillor Cogan, I can probably answer some of that. So we did raise with Susan and Stuart from LGNZ the induction process, or the strong feelings around that. They've given an undertaking that is a consistent message that they've heard across the sector, and they're reviewing induction post the elections this year to put a whole lot more purpose around the role of a councillor as a role instead of the role of LGNZ in terms of a structure there. They also acknowledge that the missing link in communications is often the councillors, so correspondence generally goes to the Mayor and occasionally the CE, but very rarely to wider council. Or if it does, it can sometimes get lost in the noise with multiple emails. So they've acknowledged that, and they have given us a commitment that that's something that they're taking back to National Council to review. So both of those matters, induction and support to elected members as individuals, and also communication with individual elected members, through bulk emails, etc., has come back to them via us, and they've given their undertaking that they'll be taking that to National Council and embedding it in their work plan going forward.
Well, then I'm happy with that response.
Just one more point to raise. We did tell them, they used to do this in the past, that we don't see LGNZ on the West Coast very often, and at least once a year getting in front of councillors so that, we can actually critique them on, once again, the value for money, and to ensure that the subscription we're paying for is actually still justified. So they've committed that they need to do that, and they've committed to do that going forward.
Okay. Yep.
Is there any further discussion on this matter? Paul.
Thank you. Yes, they're a bit like politicians, aren't they? You don't see them until election year rolls around. So we've heard that they got a bollocking from the Grey District Council. Did they get the message from our councillors about the Three Waters?
Aye, so we can talk about that too. Very strongly our disquiet and disapproval for the position of LGNZ in relation to the Three Waters reform package. They did not push back on that, and they suggested that they're hearing quite a number of councils express that view to them. They did, however, offer a rationale around the steps that they took, as they believed that they were right in doing so, particularly the memorandum of understanding with the government, which was something obviously our council had quite a lot of discussion about. But I think it was very, very strongly put by myself and Deputy Mayor Carruthers, with Simon present, around the Three Waters, and how that we felt that we had been let down by Local Government New Zealand as part of that process.
Right. Okay, but thank you. It doesn't sound like there was any mea culpa from LGNZ though.
They did acknowledge that in hindsight, the consultation with the sector was not adequate, and they have given an undertaking that it won't be occurring again like that in the future. They were effectively, in their opinion, strong-armed by the government in relation to this, with a mandate to push this through anyway. So I know that's not necessarily what we believe, and that was just their rationale around the steps that they took.
Right. And so have they recoiled from that position at all, or are they still steamrolling ahead as well?
So the piece that they have clarified to us was that the piece around compulsory participation, that they never agreed or signed any memorandum that suggested that it would become compulsory for councils to opt in. Obviously, the government now has taken that step, so they have the ability to represent the sector in that space. There is nothing binding on individual councils to take individual action against those steps as well, and they made that clear. So the position I think they're taking is, it's in that, or my reading of their written report in that meeting was that they are now seeking the direction of the sector as to the next steps to take in relation to Three Waters reform.
And I did read that where the president of LGNZ said that they're going to be all over the next government reforms, which is the reform of the local government sector. But I do hope that they take a different path than they did with Three Waters. So I hope they have got that message loud and clear and actually learn from it. But thank you.
I think it's fair to say that they acknowledge that the Three Waters process is not satisfactory to all parties involved, including the government, because I think the government would have liked the sector to have jumped on board more. So it's everyone is probably equally dissatisfied with the whole reform process, and the reforms of local government. They heard very clearly from us that coming and doing a Zoom PowerPoint will not be enough consultation with the sector. We actually need to be heard, particularly rural and provincial councils who make up a large percentage of the numbers and members of councils in New Zealand. In terms of the reforms of local government, it's critical that our voice is heard, and it's not just a roadshow one time, and there's no ability to have true, genuine and meaningful influence into that kaupapa. Any further comments? We do have a resolution proposed. Deputy Mayor Carruthers voiced it earlier, that council continue on, as Western District Council continue as a member of Local Government New Zealand and pay the invoice that was presented at the previous council meeting. Is there someone prepared to second that resolution?
I'll second that, Councillor Neal.
Mover and a seconder. Put the resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? The resolution's carried. Is there anyone recording their vote against? Just thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. We now at the close of the action list, so thank you, Simon, for presenting that. And we're moving into our presentations. It's my pleasure to welcome the Director of Regional Relationships, James Cagle from Oko Kotahi, NZ Transport Agency, to give us a presentation. James.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Excellent.
It's
Look,
slightly faint.
Slightly faint. I'll do my best to get my microphone as close as I can and speak up. No, that's all good. I appreciate the feedback. Look, it's my intention today to run through a short series of slides just to run through some of the things that are happening nationally. And if we've got time, I know I respect that you're now running late, so you probably do want to catch up on your agenda. Really, I think that the best of these sorts of exchanges is in fielding your questions and seeing what I can answer directly or take away and get answers back to you. Apologies for not being there in person. It is much preferable when I'm standing in the room with you, but maybe next time. So look, I will just try and make sure that this presentation works. So, can you see a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Right. Thank you. So, look, just a few things that are happening nationally that is worth drawing your attention to. Some of these aren't actually things that Western District Council can do, frankly, anything about, but it's always good to be aware of what's going on. So a few years ago, you will be aware that we had a very public, very embarrassing and very distressing regulatory failure where it was quite clear we were not fulfilling our duties as the regulator of the land transport system. We have been consulting up until about the middle of this month on new proposals for funding our regulatory model. Basically, we need to collect more revenue by way of fees and charges in order to make sure that we are operating the regulatory system properly. If you saw what we were consulting on, the short upshot is we were proposing to reduce the cost of sitting driver's licenses, for example, but increase the cost of various sorts of regulatory activity, anything from accessing the driver license database through to getting licensed as a vehicle tester. The decision on how much we actually charge, the outcome of this sort of consultation isn't actually ours, it's Cabinet's, but we undertook for Cabinet to undertake the consultation, and any changes that Cabinet agrees to will be well advertised and won't kick in until next year. But we are clear, and Cabinet is clear, that the charges need to change. They haven't moved in about 20 years, and they simply are not funding an adequate regulatory system. Meanwhile, your officers will have been involved, I'm certain, in helping us to build a much longer term 30-year baseline network vision. So basically an understanding of what the land transport system in New Zealand looks like and what the pressures are likely to be across 30 years. I'm sure you're all well familiar with our 3-year funding cycle, and we can build that into at the moment, about a 10-year plan. But we're very conscious that we need to be planning on a much larger scale, much larger time scale, given the time frame that infrastructure lasts for. We need to be building things at the right time for the right reasons, and so we are moving as fast as we can to a much longer 30-year vision. At the same time, we absolutely understand, particularly for local government as approved organisations, our funding processes are slow and annoying, and we have particularly heard from local government that our business case process is painful. So we are attempting to make that easier and better. We are fairly clear, I'm fortunate, I have to say, that that business casing in terms of going through a business case before we agree to fund large projects is still the right approach, but we absolutely accept that it can be a painful process that has some rough edges, and so we are working with local government sector to make that less painful and hopefully make it less costly as well. You may have seen some coverage. So far, the only coverage I've seen really in a locality is in the North Island, but I certainly hope to see some in the South Island soon. But you may have seen some coverage of the now legal kura sign. So this is the very first of what will be many bilingual signs in the land transport system. The government asked us to look at bilingual signage, look at opportunities to alter the regulations that sit around what signage is legal in the land transport system. The school sign is now the required school sign. So as school signs are replaced around the country, these are what you will see pop up in place of the traditional stranded school sign. And it is the first step in what is a much larger piece of work with Te Matawai. And next year you should see a very substantial change to a large number of signs, principally the regulated wayfinding signs, the direction signs, and a number of roadworks signs, the stop-go signs, those sorts of things. All of those should start to roll through with bilingual options. Road to Zero, always a topic of interest in local government. So you will, I'm sure, have seen advertising campaign to raise awareness on New Zealand's appalling statistics with regard to deaths and serious injuries on our roads. I absolutely acknowledge that the advertising campaign is not everyone's cup of tea. To be fair, to get ahead of the question, it's not designed to be, but that's okay. But to allay some fears that rest, I think, understandably with communities and local government, this is not a universal program to slow everyone down or to defund investment in the system, but it is designed to align New Zealand's approach to road safety with international best practice. So as you can see from this slide, there are 5 strong focus areas over many decades in order to get our road statistics in line with the best international ones. I think the most important ones to call out for your interest are the fact that we need better and stronger road policing. So we need better enforcement on our roads. We absolutely do need to move speeds on our roads to a safe level, but we also recognise that we need to invest in safe infrastructure where appropriate. And so it is those three, and we need safer vehicles. So if you're driving around in a one-star vehicle, can I please implore you to think about upgrading? Over time, we need to move the New Zealand fleet to a much safer set of standards. This isn't something that we'll see a quick fix. We're not going to bring our road toll down quickly, but it is something that we need to recognise we are no longer world leaders in, and if we follow what is occurring in places like Victoria or South Australia and Australia or many parts of Europe, then we know we can absolutely meet, at the very least, the top line target on this slide, which is reducing deaths and serious injuries on our roads by 40% by 2030. Turning quickly to the West Coast, and I'm sorry, these figures are for the entire West Coast. They are not specific figures for Western District. But just looking at maintenance and operations, we've completed a really substantial program of work this season, but we have a reasonably large program of work next season. I absolutely recognise what may be a concern for some councillors, that we have prioritised this season chip seal renewals over some of the more aesthetic elements of our maintenance and operations program. That is in order to get the road pavement up to an appropriate standard, but we have acknowledged that planting work needs to be done, and we will look to program that more strongly into next year's season. Just a note on special purpose roads, really this isn't a slide to say that I've got much news, but really just to note that I know that I need to come back to you on this. We still have a board position that we, Waka Kotahi, are to exit control of special purpose roads across the country by 1 July 2024, and you will be well aware that you have one of those in your district in the south. Just to note that we will have a proper process when we get closer to that time frame, and I would expect that to begin with engagement at a staff level, and then I would absolutely have the expectation that you as a council will be fully informed and engaged with in terms of process. Hopefully I will have something for you post-election. Last comment. Look, I was speaking to our board yesterday, talking about my region. Just to note, network resilience continues to be a strong focus, at least for me. It's an issue that comes up regularly in dialogue with local government. I acknowledge that the current policy settings and funding settings make it difficult to achieve community aspiration in terms of resilience on the network. We are doing our best. We will continue to do our best. I have to say it is somewhat frustrating to be sitting here talking to you while Arthur's Pass is closed and has been closed for the last at least 24 hours while we clear a truck on the Canterbury side of the pass. So network closures are something that we recognise absolutely impact local communities. One of the things I want to note, even if we don't have, I think, the security of funding to address substantial resilience problems, we do recognise that there is work that we need to do as Kotahi in the information space. We think we can do a much better job of providing information in a manner that the public can access in a timely way to better understand whether there are network disruptions, so that you don't get down the road half an hour and work out that you're going to get stuck for another couple of hours if something's happened. We can be much better at helping people plan their journeys, because there isn't at the macro level the opportunity for us to build our way out of the resilience challenges that we face, particularly in your neck of the woods. But we can be much better at allowing people to be flexible when resilience is a challenge. And with that, Councillor, that's the slides. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you all, and I'm sure there were questions.
James, thank you very much for your report and presentation. I'll open it up for questions through the chair of James in relation to his report or any other matters.
Yeah,
Councillor Davidson, then Councillor Hartshorn.
Thanks, James. Just on the maintenance and operations program, do you see any risk that not meeting those targets?
No more risk than normal, Councillor. Look, it's worth noting I know you will have experienced it as a council yourselves, the change in funding signals that occurred very, very late in building the National Land Transport Program about September last year. They came so late that in building our program, so we got more money, but building the program for the season just concluded, we all had to, I think, crunch that work down because we didn't think the funding would be there. And then when the money was there, it was very difficult to re-expand that program. We've done our best, as I say, to meet that chip seal target. But it means actually some work has been pushed in the 3-year program into year 2. So year 2 is a big year, but we've had plenty of time to plan for it. So no, I don't see any more risk than normal. You know, weather, other events can always get in the way, but no, I don't see any particular risk to flag for next year's program.
Thank you for that, James.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Yeah, James, I'll just got 3 or 4 questions here. I'll just in the 30-year planning, how does the West Coast Insurer get to its value out of the whole of New Zealand? You know, for the area we've got.
Look, it's a difficult question because, of course, it's ultimately, even in a 30-year plan, regulated by government policy. But the short answer is we talk. You know, we need to be talking, but our officers need to be talking to your officers. We need to understand what your plans are for the district, where your pressures are, where the hard points are, whether they're resilience or anything else. And we need to make sure that the 30-year plan that we're building is actually representative of what communities are likely to be facing in 30 years. There's no point in us sitting sort of interviewing ourselves, building that sort of thing. So it should already be informed via your plans and via your officers, but we need to make sure that that's constantly being checked on.
Yeah, so it seems pretty hard when we're talking about throwing a special purposes road at the council. You know, that's huge, isn't it? You know,
that sort of discussion on the special purposes roads, I don't think will be an easy one. But I honestly, I don't have any sense of how that's going to play. So in that particular instance, I think we just need to see where we get to by the end of the year.
So just on the reselling and all that,
sure.
What sort of percentage of the West Coast roads is actually covered in that 70 or 64 Ks or whatever it was?
I did have that figure, to be honest, and I'm not sure I've got it now, but I can come back to you. It was a substantial resale program.
Yeah, but over total roads, like used to be like a 10-year plan, doesn't it?
Yeah, it used to be something like that. I'll make sure I get the information back to Simon so that it can be passed to you.
Yeah. And just one question that doesn't probably relate to you, but well, 2 actually, but will relate to you. Road to Zero, and the way, like I'm dealing with a firm in Christchurch at the moment that every vehicle they got is electric.
Yep.
And you're walking down your driveway and it's right up behind you. You don't even know.
Yep.
You know, when you start, we're moving into an electric EV period. How are we going to protect pedestrians, cyclists? You know, it's. Are you guys talking to the government about how they're going to do this? Is there going to be a cycle lane everywhere, or?
Oh, there won't be cycle lanes everywhere, but no, you're absolutely right. The silence of the EVs is a road safety issue.
It can be very scary.
It can be very scary to suddenly realise there's a vehicle behind you. You never heard it coming.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And long but last, just still the EV thing. How is the government proposing to fund the roads?
Fund the roads
when the fuel tax is gone and the mileage tax is gone.
Yep, no, it's a very good question. So there is a piece of work underway at the moment, led by jointly by Treasury and the Ministry of Transport, which local government should be a part of. You're certainly part of terms of reference. So whether there's been engagement yet or not, I don't know. But you're a key part of the equation, as are we. So that piece of work is looking at exactly that question. How do you fund the land transport system in a fit for purpose way, given that we know the current funding mechanisms are not enough?
The current isn't enough, and you know, so I think there's going to be a surprise there for all those EV drivers that they're going to have to pay a mileage or something. But
Yes, some form of charge as soon as EVs become a larger proportion of the fleet. At the moment, they are not paying for land transport.
Yeah, no, that's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn. Councillor Kogan.
Hi, James. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I've just got a few things here I just wanted to go through with you. So with the presentation, like you said, I think, you know, like if you could just keep in mind when they come to us, it's for us more specifically to, you know, the Westland District area is, yeah, that information is probably more beneficial to us when, especially when we're passing information on to, you know, the people out in the community. Rather than generalised West Coast, because when I see things like, you know, stone shipping highways and stuff, well, I mean, for all we know, that could have been up in Karamea and...
as you can see from the map, there absolutely will have been activity up in Karamea, and I totally accept that isn't. It's simply the way the contracts are broken down. I can try to break it down to Westland District, but we operate a full contract for the full coast.
Yeah. Now, do you, in saying that as well, like I'd be really interested to get some sort of an update from you on the dollar value funding specific investment and projects that are planned, even over the next, I'm not sure whether you have I'm not looking for a 30-year plan, but even a shorter term plan of where what that funding is and, you know, where that intention needs to go. Now, I did raise this last time when you did come along and speak here, because when we initially talked about this, we came up with 11 specific areas in the Westland District that were of concern. That one being Knights Point as an example, and someone was going to go away and look into that so we could feed that information back to Waka Kotahi. Like it's just a bit of a confidence thing for me to know that they are actually, you know, somewhere sitting in the plan to be investigated.
There's a safety road for a users group anyway for the West Coast that Carl actually chairs, and that list of high level safety elements is raised quarterly with that group.
Yeah. Do we have a list of, we must have a copy of what we talked about and where, because I know we talked about it quite extensively.
Before James's time, with Jim, etc., there was a presentation for the high level focus points for Kotahi.
Could we fish that out?
I'd be really interested in seeing that. Yep.
To ensure that, because I know at the time we had some quite lengthy discussion around those areas as well. Now I'm going to come to my bugbear, James.
I knew you would.
Which, and yes, it is aesthetic. But I'm just having some real difficulty with, you know, that I know that we are limited to funding, but I'm struggling with what dollar value is being thrown into things like, you know, regular mowing of our state highway edges, and also like, I wish I had actually my photos here to show you today, but there's an example at the moment that's still not been addressed, and this is going on for months, is, for an example, the roadside out near the Arahura Bridge. It's full of weeds all around the island and everywhere. They look terrible. Every time I rain, even suggest it to Waka Kotahi. I mean, the last conversation I had with them over here was that, you know, unless it grows to a length where it's actually going to impair, you know, the view of the people driving, then we can't really do anything about it. And I've even suggested to throw it out there that if they haven't got the funding, then can we organise some volunteers? I'll even go out with my spray backpack and spray it. But then, of course, you know, that got shut down because we're talking about $6,000 traffic management plans to actually simply do some weed spraying. Which, yeah, I mean, and I'm sorry, but that's, to me, it's just ridiculous. And like, it also looks, it's just, you know, like they're not, I wouldn't have considered in the bigger picture, they're not big ticket items. They're just having somebody, surely, that can go around and just every now and again work on these roads and work on a bit of spraying to just keep them tidy and presentable.
So look, I acknowledge the frustration, and I do understand it. I'm afraid I don't have an answer to satisfy you, because you, in a way, you've already articulated, I think, the position. We aren't funded to, sorry, our maintenance and operations budgets don't allow us to cover aesthetics. They can only really allow us to maintain for safety, which certainly does some level of aesthetics, but not nearly as much as many communities, and you are not alone, councillor, as many communities would like. And whilst I do understand the willingness and desire for communities to say, oh well, then let us sort it out, I really would urge caution. I know I might sound overly cautious, but the reason temporary traffic management exists is to keep people safe. And I have far too many emails, far too regularly, notifying me of serious incidents on our roads that are just, you know, that I'm sure 90% of the time people undertake the activity perfectly safely, and then that one time it isn't safe. So I certainly do not want to encourage communities to undertake road maintenance themselves.
So the alternative
without the appropriate. The alternative, unfortunately, is unless the funding mechanisms are altered and the funding settings are altered, the alternative is that I'm afraid that you put up with it as it is, and when it gets to a particular level, we can deal with it, but we can't deal with it before that, because whilst each individual activity is relatively small, as you note, having someone or multiple people going around and doing this everywhere certainly adds up, and we at the moment need to prioritise that funding into much more high priority road safety activities than simply aesthetics.
And is that things like putting extra motorways and up in Auckland?
No, because
I just wonder. I've got to say it. I just wonder where, you know, that funding and investment comes, how much of that comes into the West Coast, because visually we certainly, I wouldn't say, get value for money. And to me, you know, I appreciate where you're coming from and your hands are tighter, but to me that's not a resolution.
No,
it is a real problem. And it's a problem that shouldn't be just getting put into the too hard basket. It needs to be taken to somebody somewhere to be discussed further. Interestingly enough, and I know it's not just here that it's happening, I did put an item up some time ago on the Coasters page, and I was actually surprised at how many people from other areas of New Zealand responded to me going, thank goodness, Jenny, we've been trying in our area to get, you know, so, you know, for us as taxpayers and road users, you know, surely there's somewhere this can go or be raised or considered, rather than, sorry, we're just not going to do anything about it.
No, I fully appreciate it, and I'm glad that you've noticed that other communities are equally as concerned. Apropos of your previous discussion on the previous item with regards to Local Government New Zealand, and with regards to the funding review that I referenced to an answer to one of the previous questions, I think it is legitimately an issue that local government and Local Government New Zealand should raise with ourselves more generally, but equally with the ministry and with the minister over the funding settings in the land transport system. I don't think it is a case though of money being spent on new highways in Auckland versus road maintenance. It is because they largely come from different budgets. It is more about the need to prioritise within the road maintenance budget for safety outcomes, because those are the ones that we are mandated to pursue. Your own council will face the same problems of prioritising a maintenance budget within limited means. But if the concerns are such from the community that you believe that money ought to be reallocated to those areas, then I really do encourage you to raise it at a ministerial level.
Through local government New Zealand.
Either through local government New Zealand as a sector, if it's a sector-wide issue, or if you simply wish to focus on the Western District issues, then the council, can write directly.
Well, as far as I know, there have been letters written directly
Several times.
to, and who have they gone to, Simon?
Directly to James previously.
Yes, so sorry, Simon. I'm saying in light of the funding review, the work being undertaken by the ministry, then I think approaching the ministry on that subject would be useful.
No worries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn.
Yeah, just a couple of last questions. James, I've noticed, and you come back to safety, you were talking about driving from here to Hokitika, from Franks Joseph to Hokitika, and even driving through the Lewis Pass the last couple of weeks ago. I was actually quite blown away. There was marker pegs and signs, even at night, hardly showed up. And in the early parts of the journey, they were just absolutely green. That is probably one of the biggest safety things. There's no money.
And reports of that are concerning. So if you do have examples of that, I encourage you. I mean, not to stop in the middle of the night and take photos of it. Please don't do something like that. But by all means, send me a note, and we'll get our maintenance people out to have a look at it, because that isn't the sort of aesthetic things that we can't address. We should be addressing those sorts of failures, because
that's pretty much where you just about wherever you drive in the bush areas. And the other thing that Councillor Kennedy's talking about really comes back to make sure, does the coast get its share of money for these things, isn't it?
Councillor Kennedy.
Does Councillor Kennedy come back to?
Maybe.
Slip of the tongue, I think.
Oh, Kogan. Councillor Kogan. Okay, no, thank you, Ian. Any response to that, James?
I need to say that I understand the concerns of councillors in terms of fair share, particularly with regard to road maintenance. The key is at an officer level, working with our investment advisors and yourselves to make sure that we understand your needs in terms of road maintenance. And that we are appropriately escalating that. I'm not aware that there are particular concerns, but I am absolutely aware that across the local government sector, the amount of money available for maintenance and operations is not felt to be enough. So,
just quickly from me, James, I'm just supporting what Jenny said around visuals and everything. I think if you notice on the other side of the bridge, the lawns are mowed. I employ somebody to do it.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't be telling you this, but
no, you shouldn't.
and we also mow the lawns going up to the night. Otherwise, it'd be an absolute tip.
Yeah.
So Jenny, you might wake up one morning and it's done. Leave it with me.
Meanwhile, I will take back a specific point about the Aotearoa Bridge and the lawns either side to just make sure that we do actually have the issue on our radar. So thank you both.
Anyone in chambers with any questions?
Yep.
Paul.
Thank you. So, kia ora, James.
Kia ora, Paul.
A rare bouquet from me for NZTA. The repair on the Mount Hercules and the Fox Hills is awesome. I mean, you could drive over there and you hardly know the devastation that was caused by those storm events. So that was, and it was done in timely. Like Mount Hercules did go on, but it was such a massive rebuild. But the repair for Fox Hills was awesome. I was interested at Mayors and Chairs where you'd said in relation to questions about we always get storms on the coast, which we do, of course. But you said that in actual fact, NZTOs has expended its total budget for this because of the number of storm events. I was wondering if you could talk about that, and also in relation to epitaph cutting. And that horrendous slip within spitting distance of the road. I know that you've told us previously that you have contractors that keep an eye on that, but given the frequency of these big storm events, epitaph cutting needs more than just an occasional eye on it.
Yep. No. Thank you for the questions or the reminder on the emergency works budget, Paul. On epitaph first, it is more than just keeping an eye on it. We do actively monitor it. I absolutely understand the desire for a more permanent fix. We've got a program of work as part of a national resilience strategy to build towards the next NLTP, the 24-27 NLTP, to see if we can't advance some key resilience projects, and we recognise that area needs a more permanent solution. We don't have funding for that at the moment, but we need to do the work towards that for you. And as it develops, I will absolutely do my best to keep you informed, because I know it's of interest to the local community. On the emergency works budget, and thank you for the reminder. So yeah, it is just the point I made in speaking to West Coast Mayors and Chairs. We have already spent within 1 year the full anticipated budget. Now we'll get more money, but we have spent in 1 year the amount we anticipated to spend across the full 3 years on emergency works and repairs, and that is simply a reflection of the degree to which we are seeing natural events impact on the land transport network, and certainly so in your region. The way that budget works is we will take that money away from new projects in order to top up and make sure that there is money for the emergency works, because they absolutely take priority. So running through that money doesn't mean there won't be money for emergency works down the track, but it is simply to highlight the magnitude of I guess the emergencies that we're facing.
Thank you. Any further questions from the chambers? No. Okay, cool. I have some, James, if you don't mind, and then we'll get moving because we have another presentation and we're a bit over time. But if we just talk budgets, something that concerned me and a number of councillors at the previous council meeting from our transportation managers update was the fact that Waka Kotahi had actually slashed nationally their budgets for roading maintenance and improvements and reseal programs. So we were actually facing this dilemma of actually, not being able to potentially achieve the targets in relation to bitumen reseal that we had intended to. Throw in on top of that inflation, and then also the spiralling cost of oil. What sort of relief has the government put in place in terms of budget 22 to alleviate the pressures and actually keep up with the agreed plans of work?
So nothing specific in budget 22. One of the impacts that you may be seeing flow through is as I referenced, the late addition of new money into the NLTP around September last year meant that we all, ourselves as a road controlling authority and yourselves, we all had to build our road maintenance budgets for this season just finished on the assumption that there would be less money. Now, in the end, the Crown put more money into the system, And so across the 3-year period, there should be enough money for us to maintain our maintenance operations levels where we thought we needed to. But we absolutely acknowledge that there was probably a squeeze for many, including ourselves, in year 1. So at a macro level, that's the picture. But I do also acknowledge your point about bitumen, and other supply chain issues, and the inflation being experienced in the system. That erodes the position regardless.
That's the dilemma we're facing, because ratepayers see roads, they don't see council controlled or owned roads, they don't see NZTA roads, they see roads.
Totally understand. So
I guess the message here is we can't afford to let a core function of council slip so far backwards that we never can catch up again with our resale program. And so we need some additional support to be able to, financial support to be able to achieve the agreed work plan, because in terms of the functions of council, transportation is a significant part of council. It's a large budget area, but it's also a very necessary one. And I think we need to put forward very strongly to you to take back to your board and hopefully feed through to the government that there is a real impact on what will be achieved if there is no additional money forthcoming in relation to the Waka Kotahi budgets to achieve our agreed outcomes and KPIs.
Yeah, so I'll absolutely take the message back. There isn't additional money in the system. In fact, there's actually less, because COVID has had an impact on revenue in terms of money incoming into the system versus what was projected. But we will do our very best to cover that. But we are all impacted by cost escalation and are all having to reprioritise works. And I acknowledge that it is not an easy thing, and absolutely take your point that ratepayers, citizens don't look at a road and go, well, that's Westland Districts and that one's Waka Kotahi's, and who am I angry at today? They just want a roading network that works. But I don't have an easy answer for you on inflation. There isn't an extra bucket of money that we can dip into to find money for ourselves or for you to help alleviate that pressure. All we can do is try to best cut our cloth to fit. But I'll take the message back in case someone else has a solution.
Well, quite frankly, when I look through that presentation, and there's a lot in there that I agree with, but significant investment in reducing speed limits compared to resale, not so sure. Significant investment in replacing schools signs that they're now bilingual and say Kura school, very worthwhile, but put against fixing potholes and resealing roads, I don't necessarily think that some of the arguments stick. So I appreciate you're the messenger and we're not here to cane you, but it's a significant one.
So on the signage, just to cover off that point, Councillor, you are not required, nor would you be expected to replace those signs now. They will be something that is replaced in the normal course of maintenance. So there shouldn't be any extra cost associated with that.
I guess it comes back to what drives government, right? So
Absolutely.
Policy and direction and outcomes. And to me, and I think, you've heard from our councils, we're not asking for a lot. We're actually just asking for the basics. So please, in summary, please take that message back. You've heard the voice of council. It's really about getting and maintaining the assets we have and keeping them up to a standard that that the roading network and the infrastructure associated with it is able to cope with the needs of West Coast residents and visitors. And appreciate Paul's bouquet to you, James, on behalf of us all. And thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, thank you for that session. We'll just take a little step backwards. I failed to ask for a mover and seconder that we receive the action list, and that we remove the 2 items as presented by the Chief Executive. So I just ask that someone please move that.
Councillor,
Adoption of that. Councillor Hart,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Those against? The resolution's carried. And the second one is to receive the presentation from James Cagle, Regional Director, Waka Kotahi. Someone to move that, please.
Move that, Councillor Neal. Second.
Councillor Neal, seconded Councillor Hartshorn. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much, councillors. And now it is my pleasure to welcome the team from the Department of Conservation to speak to us, Western District Council. I believe they are in chambers, and we'll welcome them up to the podium.
Mayor, councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm Mike Legg, Chair of the Conservation Board, and so this is really an update on where we're at. I did come to the council just after I was appointed as chair, and so I'd just like to take you first of all through how the constitution of the conservation boards are organised. For a better understanding of how we work. So there are 15 conservation boards in the country, and these are all appointed by the Minister of Conservation. All the positions are publicly notified, usually around December, and the Minister usually makes these final appointments around about June, July. So it's a very public process, shortlist are drawn up, works through its way through the New Zealand Conservation Authority to the Minister, and the Minister makes the final decision. On our board, we currently have 7 members. We are short of 4 members. Normally our board is 11. But as you probably know, we had some resignations last year, and the Minister appointed 1 person so that we'd also have a quorum, but did not reappoint any other members to the board. And our board numbers were expected to be made up to 11 in this round that's coming up now. So the board, I have to say my board is very good. It's very effective. I've got a lot of, even though we've only got 7 members, I've got a lot of expertise on the board, which is very variable in terms of the skills that they bring to the board. Our board has a representative from Ngāti Waewae and a representative from Makatio. These are statutory appointments, and they come through a different appointment process through Ngāi Tahu to the Minister. So these are not part of that public notification process that I told you about, where the other board members are appointed. And I've got 2 excellent representatives, Rob Wilson from Makatio and Ronnie Baldwin from Ngāti Waewae, and they bring a lot of expertise to the board, which I'm very grateful for. The other board members, I have a freshwater biologist, a person who works on climate change. I've got people who are familiar with the RMA. Everyone's familiar with the Act, Conservation Act, which we appointed under Section 6. So I'm very pleased with the board I've got, and it's a very functional board. So every year, the Minister of Conservation sends to every board in the country what's termed a letter of expectation. So there's a generic part of this letter, which basically goes to all boards saying, you know, do a good job, etc. And then there's a specific part of the letter which relates to the boards. And so the boards are expected to make their annual work plan around the letter of expectation. So fortunately for us, our thinking is in line with the Minister. So I'm very relieved about that. So I think probably what I should do is just take you through where our position is at the moment. So from the board's point of view, we have probably 4 main work items. The first is to enhance and work in partnership with Makapia, Waiwai, and Naitapu. This I see as a really important part, and I hope that we will be involved in every aspect of the board's business with our representatives in the wider community. Currently, we're just activating the CMS, the Conservation Management Strategy. This is going to be a full review of the CMS, and we already have 2 planners assigned to us. We've had a workshop recently to look through CMS, and this will be a total rewrite of the CMS. The CMS we've got is rubbish, it's no good at all, and so we need to look at that in great detail and rewrite the whole document. We also need to look at the Western National Park plan. As you may well know, this was started, the review of the plan was started about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was halted for various reasons. But it is the plan is well out of date. The CMS and the plan have significant crossover areas which restrict the plan, and so we need to look at how we can use the CMS to enhance the development of the Western National Park plan. So we can't do both at once, obviously, but the CMS has the first priority, and once we have that underway, I would like to start looking at the Western National Park plan, because I think it's been waiting for a long time. There's a lot of restrictions in the park that we need to look at seriously. The other area which is important to us is the Kaharingi National Park. So the Kaharingi National Park plan is out of date. It is not our responsibility. It's the Nelson Marlborough Board responsibility. But as you may be aware, when we added 5,000 hectares to Kaharingi, most of the park lies in the Buller. So I'm currently looking at how we can coordinate this with the Nelson Marlborough Board. I'll be meeting them on the 30th of June, their board meeting, to discuss this one item with them. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to launch straight into it, but I think we have to open discussions on it, because again, this is a park plan that's well out of date and needs a review. Some significant issues with that park as well. And the other area which we are working with jointly with the Nelson Marlborough Board is the Upper Aurora development. And we've had a working party chaired by Jess Curtis from DOC, and she has done a fantastic job chairing this working party. And the working party itself has done a good job. I joined it late when I came on board. But the developments, I was up there a few weeks ago, and the developments up there are really good. It's going to be a fantastic visitor experience with sort of finish. And they are now working on the road, and the contractors have also agreed to actually allow the Karamea tourist operators up the road at certain intervals. So the Karamea tourist operation is hopefully not going to be too affected by the developments of the road. The road is going to be significantly improved. I mean, for anyone who's been up there, you'll know what the road's like. The other area which, of course, we're concerned about, we get updates on, is the Heath track. And of course, there's going to be significant expenditure on the Heath track bridges. And the board gets regular updates on those. So we have our meetings vary in venue. And when we move to a venue, as in Westport last time, we get a full update of what's happening in the Buller. We're in Greymouth on the 22nd of June, and we'll get a full update on that area. Our first meeting this year was in France. We went down to France, to look at the whole issues down in France, helicopters, tourism, effects on the community. We do have a social responsibility as well as a conservation responsibility. And so, and we spent 2 days down in France looking at these issues which are affecting France. So then we get a full report while we're down there on activities in Southwest. So when we move around, we get full updates on the regions that we might visit. We always try and make those a 2-day meeting so that we can have a field trip and look at issues. As we looked at in France, we met with glaciers and issues with landing sites, and discuss this with the helicopter companies, as well as meeting the public. So we always have a public forum at our meetings. It's usually around about 1 o'clock. Public are welcome to sit on it. I have open meetings. Well, the public are welcome to sit on the meeting if they've got the tolerance right through the meeting. But we do have a public forum, and the public then can present to us issues that they think are relevant to them and to the board or to the department, because we are a link with the department for the community. I'll leave it at that unless, has anyone got any questions, please?
Thank you very much, Mike. We will now hand straight to Councillor Davidson. Looks like got close the biggest hand.
Thank you, Mike. I just, in terms of the CMS document, when do you think that would be complete?
What a very good question.
But the reason why I ask is that I understand like new potential cycleways and stuff like that are not to proceed on conservation land until this new CMS is completed.
Yeah.
And the government are sort of handing out funding for new cycleways and enhancing cycleways.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And this is, again, this comes back to how badly current CMS is constructed. It's too descriptive and prescriptive. So, it's a big document and we are doing a full rewrite. We're not patching it. 2 to 3 years. Bearing in mind the Conservation Board meets 6 times a year, and we're not paid outside of our meetings. But I would like to have it done faster than that, but of course it's limited by what dock planners. We need dock planners. We have 2 very good planners now working with us who were at the workshop. So I would like to think that we can move along relatively quickly, but what I don't want is to do patchwork to fix something and then have to go back to it. So the Wellington Conservation Board, which is one of the most recent ones to go through in the last 2 years, is now up for amendments. And so we don't want that. We want to have a document which is a working document as soon as it hits the ground to people. But cycleways are a good example of how there's a problem with CMS. I know it's not going to be an instant fix, but we will fix it in the review of the CMS.
And do you think, would there be a way forward to allow new cycleways going ahead prior to the CMS?
It's not for me to approve that one.
Sorry?
It's not for me to approve that one.
Okay, thank you.
But I would agree with you. I think the cycleways are really important, they're essential. But it's a constraint across the country. Yeah. Their CMSs at the moment.
Thank you, Mike.
Paul.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to appreciate the support from the Conservation Board for the common sense solution of Francesca Glacier guides. The board and the department have come under a lot of pressure at Friends over the frequency of helicopter flights, which of course is the lifeblood of the both glacier towns. So this in relation to both the CMS and especially the Western National Park Plan review. That's a major undertaking, and basically the board is on the horns of a dilemma, I think, with that particular issue. How is that viewed within the board?
I fully agree with what you're saying. The board is fully aware of these issues. And in fact, what we're down at France, we had a look at the alternative landing site that's proposed down there. And that alternative landing site makes it's just common sense, basically. The old landing site, or my current landing site, it's just no longer safe, no longer useful. But it's actually going a bit higher than is allowed within the park plan. The board fully supports the movement of that site up to where it's going to go, the 900 metre level. The board fully supports that because it's the most common sense position to take. So whatever it would take from the board, from the limited powers that the board's got, we would support that move and encourage certainly the local community, if necessary, to advocate for that site, because it's just the most common sense site. But again, it comes back to the Western National Park Plan is out of date. It's not consistent with 2022 or future. And the CMS, it took 10 years for the CMS to be written. It's probably about a 14-year-old document, so it's 24 years for the present CMS. It's just not a document which is compatible with anything now. And this is why we have to start with that first. My thought would be that as we move through the CMS, we would take national park stuff out that we can take out and put that into the national park. So that there's a limitation in how the CMS controls national parks. So the national park plan would actually be the single governing body for the national parks. That's my vision for how we want to try and change the CMS for the national parks. Because the national park plan should be for the national parks, not dependent upon another document which can run out at its own time. This is what we're dealing with
Latham.
Yep. No, just checking in. Is there anyone else with their hand up in the chambers or any other questions?
Simon, please.
You, Simon. Oh. I can see your little hand waving at me. Sorry.
Any update on the Stewardship Land Review?
What a very good question. Short answer? No. As you're probably aware, it's been delayed quite a few times in terms of public notification. I'm told very soon, but conservation boards have not been directly involved in the Stewardship Land Review, which is something we've had a discussion with the pilot. And in future, conservation boards will be involved in some way, not necessarily on the panel, but in some way with the panel. But the only information I've got at the moment is that it's coming very, very soon. And that will be another work item for our board, because if it follows the normal processes, then that would go out to public consultation. Board gets involved in the public consultation process. It will also be involved in the hearing process. And so we just wait, as everybody else does. I mean, the West Coast is tricky because of over 1 million hectares of stewardship land. Certainly picked a good one to start with. So it will be interesting to see what solutions that come up with the coast. But at the moment, everyone probably knows as much as I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and thanks, Mike. I just have a couple of questions, Mike. Just in regards to the Taipōtini plan, the combined district plan for the West Coast. How familiar are you and the Conservation Board with that document?
We've had a briefing on the document, on the draft document, and so the board is familiar with it. And of course, our members, some of our members have an active interest in that document. So this is a document which will be on our work programme for the foreseeable future. And the board will be submitting on it once we get the actual submission document. But it's a document which we are very interested in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks. I'm just trying to clarify. So the Conservation Board will be doing a submission separate to the department?
Oh, yes, yeah. We are set up as an independent body.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate that you're separate and independent and have the ability to critique that. So I was just curious. And obviously we've taken steps in the last fortnight in position in relation to SNAs. You may or may not be familiar or aware of that, but do you have a comment on that position?
I'm not aware of your position actually at the moment. I haven't seen anything on it, but certainly probably every board member that I've got has a view on SNAs, as probably a lot of other people do. But I'd be very interested in having that position, because obviously not only are the SNAs important, but it also links probably with the stewardship land issues as well. So it's going to be quite a complex issue, I think, in the end, and certainly the board would be interested in that when we get all that information to start putting it together and think about it.
So thinking about that politically, considering that maybe the Conservation Board is an appointed sort of with a slightly more the ability to network at that political level, similar to a council, has there been any thought given to how meaningful partnership could work to address some of these challenges or issues that might arise out of the exposure draft and the notified plan? In terms of the decision makers and the Conservation Board?
I'm always keen to work in partnership with people. Yeah, partnership means you can work together, you can disagree, but you don't walk out the door and try to solve problems out. So yeah, no, we would definitely be interested in working in partnership with people. And this is why we try and work in partnership with Ngati and Happy and Naitaku.
Cool. And do you have, this is slightly off track, but do you have or are you involved in anything to do with the future location of the department within Hokitika?
Yes, peripherally. I mean, that decision was made before I came on the board. I came on the board in July last year, but we support that decision to have the new centre. And I was at a public meeting on Sunday in Punakagi to get updates, and I spoke to the public. I think it was about 61 people there, and I spoke to them about the board's position, but the board supports that decision to have the new centre. So
is that, so that's talking about the government house building in Hokitika? Is that what you're referring to when you say new centre?
Yeah, the new visitor centre. It's
oh, is that, no, that might be Punakagi. Are we getting our wires crossed slightly? Sorry.
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking about the new visitor centre.
Oh no, we like Punakagi is all good. We'll push that back to Bulla, and no, just in relation to Hokitika, the future location of the headquarters for the department.
Oh, it hasn't been discussed while I've been on the board, but no doubt it will be at some stage. I'm peripherally aware of the intent, but it's never been an issue that we've been discussing on the Conservation Board as yet.
No, thank you very much. Nothing further from me, and I'm looking around the room. There appears to be no further. Oh, Councillor Hutchorn.
Yeah, Mike, I just wondered, has there been any talk of the staff housing in Franz Joseph? What's happening there? Like, talk of moving off the fault line or not? Or not, probably not just the fault line, you're actually below river level, half the houses.
So one of the things that the Conservation Board has not involved is operational and management levels.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't been updated on that, but we would probably get an update on that if there was something significant going on. But boards across the country are not involved directly with dock operational or management levels. So, you know, if they decide to move a house, they don't come to the board and say, we're going to move a house. But we might be updated on there's an issue about movement. But that wouldn't be, that would just be for information rather than the board getting directly involved in it.
Okay, yeah, no, that's all right. Just there's 3 staff houses are probably below river level, but that's all right.
There's a few of those in Westport as well.
Mike, thank you very much for taking the time, and I can't quite see if your colleague Joyce is with you, but she might be in the public galleries.
From Paul Layton.
Oh, okay. Paul.
Not exactly invisible. Just in regards to SNAs, with respect, the Conservation Board, my view, won't have any role in the SNAs because the travesty of them, of course, is it's all private land. Not conservation estate.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's right. Yeah, we're only involved in conservation estate.
My apologies, Paul. There's just the camera's just ever so blurry towards the back of the room, so my apologies. Are there any further questions?
Yes.
Well, no, I can add to that because that initial SNA process that went through.
Or if you could just take a step to your left, maybe. That's it. Perfect.
The SNA that went on probably a year ago with that desktop exercise, that included conservation land as well. So it wasn't just on private land. However, going forward, I'm not sure what's happening. So, but it included public conservation land as well.
So that would probably link with stewardship land issues as well.
No, we tried to sort of separate out. Well, it wasn't us that did the activity, it was wildlands. And so the classification of the land doesn't necessarily just give an indication of what its values are. So, it's a separate, it was just purely on what its values. But it was a desktop exercise like everywhere else. It was, yeah, well, I think you all know.
Very broad brush.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for those comments, and thank you for your time. Thank both for joining us today at Council. We've been looking forward to this presentation, and we appreciate that it's been delayed as a result of COVID. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, George.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Now someone is prepared to move that council receive the report from the Department of Conservation presentation.
I'll move that.
I moved Councillor Davidson and seconded
I can second that.
Councillor Hart, and resolved that the presentation from Mike Legg at DOC be received. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? The resolution's carried. We're now at 10 to 3. How are councillors going? Do you feel that you need to have a 5-minute tea break? Or would you like to continue?
Finish the end of this agenda.
Lily's here ready to present.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely no worries at all. Just checking in. I'd like to then welcome Lindley Truman, Finance Manager, to present the financial report. Welcome, Lindley.
Thank you, and good afternoon, councillors. Through the chair, I present the financial report for April. I'll take it as read, and through the chair, I'll accept any questions.
Thank you very much, Lindley. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Hartshorn.
Yes, there's only one question, and I've asked it before, but I'm just ask it again. Is that the $100,000 for the Franz Joseph revitalisation? Is that locked in where it can't be taken out, or is that sucked up by something else?
I'll refer that to you, Simon.
So that figure is still in the budget, Councillor Hutchell. Obviously, there will be a decision of council if we carry that over or if it's not spent this year, then we'll come back to council consideration.
Okay, so if it's not spent, we've had it there for 100 dozen years. We just don't want to lose it.
No, obviously, I think there were some conversations with the community regards to the projects that they were keen on. I'm not familiar if the funding has been utilised for some of those, or if any of them have been actioned yet.
Okay.
That we will be putting a report to council regarding any carryovers. So that will be an item that you can discuss at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
So I'm not sure whether this is something that I raise at this point now with you, or whether I bring it up in general business, but it's just around clarification around the council current financial situation and the misinformation that I believe is going on out in the community there around where that sits. Our Mayor did do a very good email back on the 9th of May that has explained in very simple terms, because I know we look at these financials, but then what's relayed that then ends up in the paper that doesn't really have an explanation to it is clearly confusing the public around where our financial situation is. And I have some thoughts on that. Shall we discuss that now, or shall we maybe discuss that?
Through the chair, point of order, this particular item is about the final report for the month, so I would suggest that we do talk about it in another, not in this item.
Sorry, some of that sound isn't coming through very well. The microphone might be a bit far away from whoever was just speaking, sorry.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to bring this up again in general business and just continue with your report. Yeah.
Any further questions from councillors? Lindley, I wonder if you would be able to give us, I appreciate the report's taken as read and it is in there, but I think it would be beneficial, page 20 of the report, total surplus of $10.62 million against a budget of 3.74. Could you please, for the benefit of all councillors and those watching, explain why council's in such a strong position regarding surplus?
It's a variety of things that are basically noted in the notes in here. So some of it relates to grants and subsidies coming through, and they're always a timing issue as well. Our interest revenue, we have reasonably high gains on swaps at the moment. But to actually give you a full detailed one, I'd have to go through and come back to you on that and give more information than is in this report.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that we're asking questions that you'd need to do that additional research, so that's not necessary in this matter. I think it's just it might also be worth talking about what that might look like going forward, how that surplus might sit going forward as well, because it, on the face of it, just looking at the sustainability report, it appears that we're in a very, very strong position with a significant surplus. But if that's grants and subsidies and that we've got in that are then accumulated as a result of phasing, and they're actually going out again very soon, that will actually have a material impact on the end of year surplus, won't it?
To a certain extent, but what will happen at the end of the year is that we will match the grants received to our actual expenditure. So what hasn't been committed will be transferred to the balance sheet. So we do some of that preparation during the year, but we do a full review next month.
Through the chair as well, I'll try and speak up so you can hear me. You have to remember also that the grants are generally against capital expenditure, so it's a bit of a false profit figure. And also, when we just mentioned the swaps, that again is a paper exercise, so it's not money.
I think it's probably just you've highlighted, Lindley, and yourself, Leslie. Thank you. It's just probably good for that context around that, because just looking at that that number, it appears that we're almost significantly over rating, right? And there would be a perception that we're bringing in a lot more funding than we're actually spending. But it's probably good to understand the context in relation to this number, how we've got there, and then what it might look like going forward, particularly as we move into next year's annual plan, where that number actually isn't going to start at that. It's going to start in a very different place.
It all goes down to accounting standards, where we have to actually account for revenues and capital expenditure. So it does give a false impression, but sadly that's down to accounting numbers.
Are there any questions from any other councillors in relation to the report? If there are none, I'd ask that a councillor please move that the report be received.
So moved, Chair.
Deputy Mayor Carruthers, and seconded Councillor Hart. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? The resolution's carried. Lindley, thank you for your work, and Leslie and Lindley, thank you for the ongoing work of your finance team. It's very much appreciated. We now move through to the 2022 Resident Satisfaction Survey results, and I welcome Strategy and Communications Advisor Emma Ray to present this report. Emma just needs a few moments to swap screens. Just at this time, some administrative matters we now need to resolve, please, to continue the meeting without taking our scheduled break. It's part of standing orders. Is there someone prepared to move that we continue with the meeting without a break?
So moved.
Deputy Mayor Carruthers, seconded Councillor Hartshorn. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And at this time, also apology from Ka Whakahaere Tūmahai, who's having to leave the meeting. Kia ora, Emma, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors and Chair. I would like to take the report as read and open the floor to any questions.
Start off, Emma. Is there some legislative requirement that we get such information, do such a report?
I'm sorry, Councillor Carruthers, I couldn't actually hear that properly. You broke up.
I'd just advise all elected members, just could you please speak clearly and as close to your microphone as possible.
Is there a legislative requirement that we undertake such a report?
I'm afraid I still didn't quite catch the end of. Is there a requirement for what?
Is there a legislative requirement for council to undertake a residents' satisfaction survey report? Is it enshrined in law?
I didn't hear that. No, there is no legislative requirement to undertake these surveys. Within our LTP, we have resident satisfaction measures, and traditionally, the way that these have been measured has been through a resident satisfaction survey. This is actually something that we are reviewing, ready for the next long-term plan, to see if there could be alternative ways to take these kinds of measurements, or alternative performance indicators within the long-term plan that could review resident satisfaction with the services.
Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
Okay, so I have a number of things to bring up around the survey, obviously, which I read at length last night. Obviously disappointing around these particular areas within the survey that are disappointing, but unfortunately for me not surprising, that have been raised and need to be addressed, I feel, is from a council's perspective, but particularly, remind me, there were 300 odd people that answered the surveys. That was out of how many, Emma?
If you have a look in the report, each section says how many responses there were to each individual part of the survey. I'm afraid I'm actually on my personal computer and I can't bring that up right now. But if I can get back to you with that information after the meeting, I can send an email out to all the councillors if you like.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, I mean, the key things for me that I know have clearly showed up in here, and whether that is that we're just passing that we've received the survey at this point, then that's fine, but and where we actually address some of those real concerns, whether we do that now, or also if we can do that further on in the meeting. I feel quite strongly about that. But I just want to note through the survey, you know, that there was a considerable amount of feedback, obviously over Bill Street, a lack of communication out in the communities, the rates, how high the rates are getting, and particularly that there seems to be a real lack of understanding out in the communities around council's financial position. Now, I believe that a lot of this all comes down to communication and there not being clearer ways of how we are presenting information out to the public that have given them perceived ideas of what's actually happening through council. They're the sort of things that I want to talk further in length around as a council and with the councillors to ensure moving forward we find a way as soon as possible to clarify some of those concerns rather than leave them until, you know, a later date.
I just wonder if the appropriate forum for addressing the outcomes of the report could be as we consider and deliberate on submissions as part of the upcoming annual plan, Councillor Cogan, and that would be forward looking. So if you could summarise the thinking that you want, or the themes, and come to that meeting prepared to discuss them, I think would be appropriate.
When is that meeting going to be though?
They're occurring in June, the submission hearings.
It's the 14th of June.
And although they're not necessarily submissions, in a way it's a submission to self, because we can reflect on these and ensure that, you know, if there's material changes or whatever that they're brought forward.
Through the chair, I would recommend that we workshop, the councillors and staff workshop the issues in here come up with some solutions, rather than doing that in this meeting, because it's going to be so difficult to do that. And also at the hearings, I think that's not the appropriate place to do it. I think.
No, sorry, I don't mean to do it in place of the hearings. Do it on that day.
Yeah,
so it could be a workshop on that day. Yeah.
I would be very happy if, and actually thank you, Leslie, I'd be very happy to actually put forward that from the survey that does happen and a workshop is held for us. I mean, I know I have my opinion around a number of things that have shown up through the survey, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. So perhaps if we can organise for when that will be and give us all sufficient time to prepare and come along with our views on it and then workshop it all together. I believe in the bigger context of it all, you know, that we can find a solution to this. And like I said, I think a lot of it comes down to communication. So, yeah, I would like to, do I need to do that do I need to move for that to happen?
I think we could just take that as an action if it's agreed by the councillors. We do have the 15th of June from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. in your diaries for that day to hear submissions. So it could be that on that same day there's a workshop component as well.
That wasn't going to, the 15th wasn't going to happen if we got through all the submissions on the 14th. Is that not correct?
Sorry, you're correct. I was looking at the 15th without looking at the 14th on my calendar. Call it the 14th.
Do we anticipate the submissions that day? Because I don't want this to be a rushed workshop either.
We've only got 7 submissions so far.
Right, okay. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Cogan. I think with the support of councillors, we would take that forward as an action and we would ask the Chief Executive to schedule a workshop.
Yeah, just speak up, Paul.
Paul.
Thank you. So through the chair, yeah, it is. It's a pretty dismal result, and it makes them quite gloomy reading. And although there's a remark at the front that you know, that needs to be seen in context that it was 2 years of COVID, which limited customer interaction with the council. I accept that has had a bearing on it, but however, you can't polish it very much, to be honest. I mean, the figures speak for themselves. Also there's a comparison that was given in the summary at the front and said that, you know, benchmarked against councils outside of Auckland, you know, not doing so bad. Whereas I think a far more useful comparison is with our nearest neighbour, the Grey District Council. And so I looked up their resident satisfaction survey, which is only just done at the same time as ours. And their overall satisfaction is 70%. The overall satisfaction with our council is 45%. The performance of the mayor and council is 76% at Grey District. With us, it's 44%, and on it goes. Overall value for money, 30%. Grey District Council doesn't have a direct comparison with that, but they do with other sections within the council's dog control, 94% against 29% here. Even parks and reserves, which is, you know, one of our jewels, is 66% satisfaction compared to 84% in Grey, and on it goes. So there are some big learnings here somewhere, and we have to take them on board. I don't think that we can afford to hope for the best that it's going to improve next time I think we do need to drill into it and find, well, what is the cause of this? And I think most telling are the remarks at the back of the report, the individual remarks, and they just go on and on and on, and they're very unflattering. The remarks that are compliments for the council aren't very many, and some of them are quite rude, which is just not called for. Some people just used it as an occasion to vent their spleen on the council for everything and all the sins of the world, including his worship and some rude remarks there. And however, I think that we do need to, is the workshop the best way to approach it? I guess, but I think also probably the staff need to, through the managers, need to, in their particular areas, need to break it down into what areas were so poorly performing and give us some explanation as to why. And there may be some logical reason. That would be my view. Thank you.
Councillor Cogan.
Councillor Cogan.
Like I said, I believe the workshop is definitely the way to go. I believe we can find resolution to quite a number of these concerns, and I will reiterate again that we need to have a really good workshop around communication, what I consider to be lack of communication and the right communication being delivered out to the community, and confusing communication. So I don't believe that it's actually the situations being as bad as what they were, but the way they have been presented. So that's why I would like, but also to address moving forward as well, so that we're not back in the situation again with any further surveys, that a better way of communicating what's going on at council is provided to our communities on a much more regular basis in simple terms.
Thank you, Councillor Cogan, and I think those comments will be picked up in that workshop too. I think there's correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a general feeling that we need to discuss and workshop the findings within the survey, and as council make some decisions about changes moving forward, and then that's reflected in governance and also management. Is there any other discussion on this report?
Yep.
Paul Madrick.
Thank you. The communication is clearly a part of it. I agree with that much. However, it can't be blamed for a lot of it as well. A lot of the criticism in the remarks is about Revel Street, or Rebel Street as it's referred to in the report. Seems very appropriate. But the comments on that are just repetitive over and over and over. And I mean, this council, we did talk about the need to involve the community on this, and to be honest, it didn't happen, and this is the result. It's all very well going down belatedly after the event and surveying the individual businesses, but it's not just the businesses, it affects the whole town, and the whole town should have had a say in it. They didn't, and they're having their say when they got randomly phoned for the survey. They used it to vent their spleen, and they're doing it. And I think there's a real learning in that the council's got to listen. And on this one, we didn't.
through the chair. In regards to engagement with the community, we have just within an internal policy has just been updated and reviewed for the consultation and engagement with the community. And this has been distributed to all staff, and there will be a workshop for staff who are likely to be using this policy. And it's around increasing earlier engagement as well as legislative consultation.
Councillor Cogan.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Cogan.
Can I please ask that if those workshops are going to happen, that as councillors as well, we are also invited along to those workshops rather than it just be for staff. It has just as much of an impact on us as it does on council staff.
Thank you, Councillor Cogan. I'm not sure. I'll hand to the Chief Executive on that.
There's obviously times when we engage with councillors, and there's time when we do our own analysis. We need to do our own analysis in terms of the survey results to actually understand them themselves. So they'll be done within staff only. Obviously, we'll look at what the outcomes of that is and share those with councillors in the workshop appropriately.
So we're unable to come to the workshop?
Once again, it's operational. We need to access it ourselves first.
Well, it's operation and
But
until it has an impact on things like the surveys that then fall back, not just on operational, but also on us from a governance level.
Hence the workshop with councillors time.
I agree. I think, yeah, do the operational ones with the staff, but feedback, how that went and changes or whatever's going to be made from that too with councillors.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I've got quite a few points I want to bring up, but I think we'll leave it for the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Is someone prepared to move that the report be received and that council receive, and the residents, 2022 residents satisfaction survey results, and instruct staff to make them available to the public?
I'll move that.
Councillor Davidson, and seconded.
I'll second it.
Councillor Neil. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The resolution's carried. Emma, thank you for the report and thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to the workshop early next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you. The next report is Cook Flat and Lake Matheson Road footpath/cycleway as a new council asset. I have been down to have a look at that this morning, and I welcome Transportation Manager from the District Assets team, Carl Jackson, to speak to the report. Good afternoon, Carl.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Grills and councillors. Relatively straightforward, should be a relatively straightforward process of the handover or acceptance of the assets into council ownership. Occasionally it's done in different manners through resource consent processes and so forth, but in this case that wasn't the process that was followed. So I'll take it the report is being read, and I'll look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. We'll start in the chambers. Is there anyone that, Paul Madgwick?
Thank you. How much are you expecting the investment cost and annual maintenance? And will that be a targeted rate for the Fox Glacier community?
So at this stage, we've estimated about $1,100 a year in total ongoing maintenance costs. Most of that's vegetation control. There'll be a little bit of surface maintenance involved in that. In terms of targeted, no, that'll be just the general rate for footpaths for the district. So that'll come out of it.
Yep, no, that's great because that's not a lot anyway. And it's a great asset, I have to say, and I would encourage it to go further. Actually, The Department of Conservation and Ngāti Mahaki are going to be opening around about October at what used to be known as Peak View, which is the lay-by down before the road heads off into the bush, like to Gillespie's Beach. And there's a whole cultural art installation that's going to open there. It's going to be quite striking, and it'll be a real draw card for Fox Glacier. This came out of that funding that came from when Musani Sage was still the Minister of Conservation, after the Fox Glacier access road was lost. And she came up with that funding for alternative tourist opportunities. And so this was one of them. Lake Galt was the other one to the track. So that's also close to being open. But the one at Peak View, or called Pika Pika or Te Waka, as it's rightly known, is that will be open around about October. So it's not terribly far past where this one turns into Lake Matheson, Kairomati. And so if there's an opportunity to start the conversation with Doc, then I'd just encourage that.
Yeah, I think that has been looked at just at a high level to start with potential routes to make those, but I'm not certain where that's really good.
Just through the two, we actually made an application for the funding to do an extension of the cycle lane following the river through Council's Road Reserve along the river line, which would be a very nice scenic walk or ride all the way through Peak View. Unfortunately, it was a good time. And there were some local residents that weren't supportive of it either, because it's currently encroached on Council Road Reserve and will go through that area.
Okay, but maybe it's something that the Department of Conservation could look at again in conjunction with yourself to extend this one down the road. It's on the road down.
It's quite a long way. It's not. Yeah.
Wow.
It's about at least 4 k's. It was.
Yeah, probably not 4 or 5.
Wouldn't be that far? I wouldn't have thought. I thought a couple.
We want to walk it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Neil.
Councillor Hartshorn, and then Councillor Neil.
Yeah, g'day, Carl. How are you? Yeah, it's a great asset for the area, and it's good to have it completed, and I think it'll be wonderful. But I think you're, just personally, my thoughts, I think you're a bit light on your maintenance, aren't you? Like, if you do break that down, it's only about 1.7 hours a month for a labourer. But it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, so it won't be maintained on a monthly basis. It'll be a little bit less frequent than that. But a lot of that work will be incorporated into activities that we do when we do the roadside maintenance at the same time. So there's the mowing component that we'll incorporate into that activity as well, and the spraying will be done in conjunction with that. So that'll keep the costs down on that side of things.
No, that's very good. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn. Councillor Neil.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, I'm definitely in agreement with us taking it over. Just one question: why was the MOU unsigned originally, and is that normal practice?
No, I'm not entirely certain on that one. It was dealt with at email level to start with, and it just never got followed through for whatever reason. I'm not too sure why that happened.
I'd like to know that it's not normal.
Yeah, no,
to be like that. And I'm really glad that we don't print out all the agendas now, because there's an awful lot of pictures and maps here that are operational, not to us, and I don't even understand them. But yes, apart from that, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the chambers? I am in Fox Glacier, so I went and had a look at this asset today. also went down right to the end, and I think it is at less than 4 or 5 k's beyond Lake Matheson Road. But I would request that before we take it over, DOC maintain it. It is mostly grass. It has a lot of weeds in that cycle walking path, and it will cost probably more than the annual budget to tidy it up before we even maintain it at an acceptable level. So the roots with it from the grass underneath them have obviously started to clump. So if they're pulled out, they're going to take quite a lot of the surface with them. So without going into the detail, it's certainly not like we're taking over what looks like a brand new asset. It's certainly got a significant amount of grass growing in it all the way down from start to finish. I think we should do it, but I think they need to tidy it up before we take it on.
Just if I may, we have been discussing that with DOC and the contractor that did the works, and there is an agreement to carry out that remedial work as part of the process.
I think the problem with that is that's grass either side. It's like putting grass, you know, a gravel track through the middle of a paddock. So when the grass, it's going to be, I would suggest, like Councillor Hartshorn, that $1,100 a year is probably a bit light for maintenance on that much. I probably want to use a formula similar to what we do with the cycle trail in terms of per kilometre annual maintenance allocation, because it's actually built to the, it's built like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been built as a combined footpath cycleway.
I just think that Fox community and the visitors would appreciate it probably a bit if it was maintained to that higher standard than maybe how it is at the moment. But with that all being said, I think there's general agreement with the recommendation in the report. So thank you, Carl, for your work on this. And is there a councillor prepared to move that the report be received and council resolves to adopt option 1, etc.? Councillor Hartshorn moved, seconded Councillor Neal. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. And the resolution is carried. Thanks, Carl, for your work on this. Councillors, we have one more report before we move into committee, so I suggest we hear and consider this report, and then we adjourn the meeting for a break, and then when we reconvene, we will be in public excluded. If that's acceptable, I'll then welcome Te Araha Cook, Group Manager, Regulatory and Community Services, to speak to the Hokitika Museum Trust Board report. Good afternoon, Te Araha.
Kia ora koutou. I will take the report as read, but in doing so, just emphasise that there is a benefit in terms of establishing a trust that is able to operate outside of boundaries that become restricted to council. And as the report is descriptive on the way through, it's about endeavouring to utilise the trust with a means to minimising any potential future requirement in terms of rates and so forward for specific projects as we do the development of the museum and extensions in the future as well. Beside that, back to the chair, open to questions.
Thank you, Te Araha. Thanks for the report. Any questions?
Te Araha, totally support the what you're suggesting. My only concern is the suggestion that the trustees are paid. I would have assumed that this would be a voluntary situation, and why are you going down the payment route for trustees?
The payment would be similar in terms of the nominal payment for a number of other committees that we have, which is pulling on, as we all know, valued time of volunteers. It may be an option where members decide that they do not want to take recompense, but we wouldn't be looking at anything more than what the base government rate by memory for trustees is, which is that 232 a day. So it's not a huge amount. We would only be looking at 3, maybe 4 meetings a year for trustee. So it's only in terms of payment for meetings that they would have to attend.
So what are we looking at on an annual basis then?
I believe we've allowed, it's either 4.5 or 5 of the museum budget in terms of payment in total for trustees. And that's is included in the, well, what we've gone out, well, consultation and engagement, but it says included in the budgets for the following years or next year's annual plan.
Are you expecting trustees to be locals, or are you looking to source them from outside, or some of them from outside of our district?
We're looking to source appointments who can actually meet the terms of reference for the museum. So if we have that skill set within local or the wider West Coast, then we would. But it's likely we'd also be looking at trying to get people from outside the district that have contacts with funding organisations, bodies, charities and other such things, or have experience in dealing with those sort of applications as we move forward, because we're not looking at the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 here and there. We are looking at significant funding applications, and we need people that are able to represent both the project, the idea, and where we're moving forward as a community.
Thank you. Paul Medway.
Thank you. So, through the chair, about 4 or 5 years ago, when the council unwisely, in my view, moved the museum into the subsidiary Destination Western Limited, I made a personal submission to the council arguing against the move, and suggested then that what was needed was a trust, a museum trust board, for instance, to be like a bridge between the museum and the council for advocacy. This is a different kettle of fish altogether. This is not, as I'm reading it, there's nothing to do with advocacy. This is simply a vehicle for fundraising, and in my view, it's all for the wrong reasons. I still believe that the museum would greatly benefit from a trust board that could give an independent overview of the museum, and basically as a kaitiaki, as a guardian of the museum, and which currently no one does other than through the council. But as for raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't agree. I don't agree with this. I think it's the wrong reason to be setting up the trust board. And I think that the plans for the museum are unaffordable, and they need to be cut to the cloth needs to be cut to suit. When the plans so far have come from the staff, when are they going to come to the council for councils to have a say in these plans? We saw them for Paki Waitawa, and they were kicked to touch, but for the Carnegie building, we haven't actually, we've had a broad overview, but haven't actually had an opportunity to talk about them. Which I think councillors should. I know I'm probably well outnumbered on this point, but I've always been an ardent supporter of the museum, and but I think there's a simpler way that it can be done than in a more affordable way for the ratepayers.
With full due respect through the chair, appreciate your position, quite regarding. But in terms of the presentation to council, that has been done in full with all councillors around the table, and it may have been that you weren't at that full detailed workshop because it did consume more than an hour of council's time going through, following a council meeting, and appreciated those that were able to attend at the time. But what we're looking at is something that's graduating in the sense that, and it's been reflected in the Hokitika Guardian today, we've been liaison with Hokitika, who have always been close with the museum. They have fully endorsed, there's been great presentations with them. That's been a 2-hour presentation, plus them then talking amongst their membership and how they'd like to see that go. The community support has been there. There's engagement going through the community. We have positive feedback from the community. What we're looking for is a management of cost and minimising that expense on ratepayers. And that does need a trust or equivalent in terms of being able to go and make approaches for applications to move forward with this project in a manner that gives us a museum that as we go forward in the future that we're proud of, not one that we're going back every 12 months or 24 months and trying to patch up because we didn't do it well the first time. We're appreciative that there is a competition for funding as we go through. What we'd like to see over time with the trust owners, why I've made reference to the development of terms of preference, is that as the council moves forward, what might the future of that trust be as it evolves, because then it can become an advocacy. Right now, critical to enable this project to go ahead, we need to decide what avenues are available for us to be able to attract funding that as a council we're excluded from, because they will not take applications from the council.
Paul.
So the Hokitika Museum was previously very well regarded around the country in museum circles as a model regional museum. And then it closed because of the earthquake situation with the Carnegie building. But other than that, what's changed? It was a model Goldfields museum. And that was under Julia Bradshaw's time. And it was, I don't think there was any need to reinvent the wheel and to end up with a more of an art gallery than a museum. We're taking off my iwi hat and putting on my hat as fifth generation West Coaster on my dad's side, where that museum should reflect our heritage. It should reflect the history of the gold mining of this area, and it's not going to. It's when you break it down, it's in there, but it's like all this peripheral stuff, and I don't agree with it. I think it's lost its way.
So I appreciate your views, Paul. I'm just thinking about the report and thinking about the establishment of the trust board. Have you got some suggestions or recommended changes for that? I'm also obviously try and pack up your comments around an opportunity for councillors to talk about the museum at a later date. But in regards to this report on the table, the formation of the trust board, would you like to see any changes, or do you, what recommendation are you leaning towards?
The recommendation I'm leaning towards is to not approve it, but I know that won't be supported. But the I don't agree that we should be scouting around for those that have got the deepest pockets to sit on a board like this because they have the ability to rake in the dough. I really think that the benefit of a trust board, a museum trust board, is to advocate for the museum. You know, that should be one of its fundamental goals, and that should be anchored locally. I don't agree.
And I think I've understood that. Can I just pass to Te Aroha just to understand in terms of the remit of the trust board? Is it envisaged that it would be acting in the capacity that Kai Whakahaere Madgwick has described in terms of advocacy, or is it going to be limited to purely just fundraising?
As part of the report, we refer to the development of the terms of reference once a decision is made from this point in terms of council endorsement being given, because obviously we don't want to do the legal work around a constitutional terms of reference that's not going forward, and that we just try and get funding where we can through council developments. But we would like to see the trust definitely develop over time in terms of advocacy. However, to do that, there would be a need to be a change in structure in terms of how the museum once again is managed by council. When we first looked at meeting for the potential for establishing a museum trust, it was when we had concerns around this table 2.5 years ago in terms of what wasn't happening, in terms of external provider looking after the museum, And because that was about bringing the information back into council and giving that strong footing and foundation for them to make recommendations to council, whether it's funding, whether it's development, what the museum looks like going forward. That changed in the sense that we've now brought the museum back in-house, which means that the council that sit around the table, managers in terms of the activity and staff are now all managed within house. So by default, the council has become the advocate of the museum in its own right, because it is now our activity as against outside. But that's not to say that doesn't develop over time, when we then set aside the council and through a terms of reference that we can then determine what does the trust then take responsibility for as the advocate for the museum. Where do the staff then sit in terms of their reporting element? Would that still come through someone like myself as a GM, or do they become a direct report to a trust, and then whoever the chair is of the trust is then advocating on behalf of the staff in the museum activity? So there is another conversation to be had in terms of what does our museum look like as we move forward in the future. But primary for us to actually take that step of then moving forward and try and lessen the potential future impact burden on rates, particularly in the development of the museum as it expands, and for looking after our collection, because there's funding required for that as well, and to make sure as part of the outfitting and whatever happens with Drummond Hall as we move forward, it's not just about the museum and the Carnegie, it's all those other aspects that got to clip onto it, and making sure that we do have that regional museum aspect that we once had, because we still see ourselves as regional museums, West Coast as well, and building on that. So yes, there's always potential for the trust to develop, but we need that endorsement first in terms of progress.
Okay, so I think I've understood that. I'll ask, are there any other comments or questions from any other councillors?
I just have one, Councillor
Hart.
Thanks for the report. I just have one around how, if it's in the report, sorry I missed it, but is there many other trust boards that we know about for museums around the district, around the country?
In terms of the West Coast, not necessarily. There may be one tied up with the Art Gallery, but in terms around the country as a whole, absolutely. And with museums I've been involved with in Central Hawke's Bay and the same Wairoa, and helped establish the Wairoa Trust. It was for the same reasons initially. It was around the funding to enable it to develop and move the shoebox it was to the refurbished building, similar to what the Carnegie layout is now. So they are critical in terms of museum, and not just for the funding, for that advocacy as well, because it does end up holding whoever the governing authority is to account.
I think so. That is interesting, yeah.
Thank you, Te Aroha and Councillor Hart. Councillor Hart, Sean.
Yeah, Te Hara, I've just had a friend appointed to the Nelson Museum at Richmond there, so that obviously there's plenty of it going on, or at Stoke, I should say. I'm a bit concerned, like, it's only so much a day, but when they start coming from all around New Zealand, how much we're going to be up for in costs, and travel and all that sort of stuff, I suppose, is one concern. Just the other, I'm a bit like Paul, and like, there was nothing prouder than going to the Hokitika Museum and showing everybody a working mechanical dredge, because, my grandfather worked on it and so many people worked on it. We just don't want to lose that old historic Hokitika part of it.
So what I'm hearing possibly, and I may have misread, so correct me if I'm wrong, is thinking around the trust board is to include them in the advocacy of the Hokitika Museum, to write the terms of reference in such a way that they are not only acting as a fundraising trust, but also have an advocacy arm that advocates for, what Kaiwhakahaere Madgewick and Councillor Hart, Sean, have just spoken about as an example of a view, but would present a view through to Mayor and Council in relation to the Hokitika Museum. Is that the reading of the room? Sorry, Paul.
Yes, I think so. I mean, as Te Aroha said, she needed the decision from today and then go to the next stage of drafting the terms of reference. I think it's crucial that those terms of reference, right from the outset, have an advocacy role, and not a number one raison d'etre of going out with a begging bowl. And I think it has to be advocacy based, and that will mean locals on there. There should be, in my view, there should be on a museum, a local museum trust board like this. There ought to be the likes of Heritage Hokitika. Iwi should be on there. There should be someone from South Westland should be on there, because it's not just about the Hokitika history as well. There should be someone on there, for instance, like David, what's his name? Richard Waugh, you know, for the aviation history, with a connection to Hokitika. These are the people that should be on there, because they know what they're talking about and they have skin in the game. Funders that come fly in from Auckland and God knows where, don't have anything. They don't have a clue. They have no interest in advocating for the heritage of this place. I'm not talking about the dollars. I'm talking about the heritage advocacy, and that absolutely has to be written into the terms of reference, in my view.
Thank you, Paul. Not wanting to delay the conversation, but there would, correct me if I'm wrong, Heritage Hokitika at the moment has an interest in the advocacy for the museum, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So this would be a separate group. Obviously could share members potentially, or have representation as alluded to in the report. But it's the remit of the trust board would be specific to the Hokitika Museum.
Through the chair.
Advocacy for the Hokitika Museum, including fundraising, right? It's about first flipping it so it's advocacy first. And as a branch of that advocacy is obviously advocating for funds.
Through the chair, I agree with that position. But just on Heritage Hokitika, has a valuable role to play, but it does not speak for all heritage around the district. A trust board that would bring in all of those elements, it would be of immense value to the museum.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I just want to understand, because then I'll go to Councillor Hutchorn, but in terms of the resolution that's drafted, it had a recommendation. I just want to check, because we've deviated slightly from that to change the onus of the trust board to be around advocacy. Just want to check with the other councillors in the room if they're supportive of that before we move forward with any further discussion. Can I just see an indication of hands? Sorry.
I don't see this as an issue of having to prioritise anything in particular. You're talking about different facets of the operation of a trust board. It's got one facet to administer the museum, one facet to govern it, one facet of raising funds. So it's not a case, I don't think, of saying that it's got this priority or that priority. It's got a whole range of functions, and the fundraising function, as I would see it, is simply one of its functions. Is that how you see it, Te Aroha?
It is, and if we go back to 3.2 with the report, and that's why it's specific there, the terms of reference for the Museum Trust Board that establishes its relationship with Council and delegations will be developed following Council's determination on how it wishes to proceed, and then a draft constitution will also be prepared. So that's what the intent is. As we say, it's the endorsement to progress with the trust. whether a trust is, the membership is local or wider representation, whether it is paid or volunteer as we move forward, but it enables us to actually progress and say, yes, we've got the endorsement to establish a trust, we determine what the qualities are that we're looking at potential applicants that are going forward, we've got a assessment and appointments panel as well in terms of going through that process. But as part of that going through between now and when we're looking at applicants, it's then coming back to council with the terms of reference, just as we have with any other committee that we've established outside of council, to say, are we comfortable with the terms of reference? What else would you want included? And then what would those delegations be? Because the delegations also become critical. Advocacy is one thing in terms of bringing things to the fore for council that might fall outside of their remit. But what delegation are we also giving the trust so that they don't always have to be coming back to council and that they have that ability to actually make decisions and move forward on certain endeavours and projects. But it does come back in terms of endorsement from council first, enables us to then develop and bring in terms of reference back to council, which can pick up on aspects from this conversation today as well.
Okay, Te Araha, I think with what you've just said, and are we prepared now, is someone prepared to move a resolution capturing that essence, that intent, that there'll be a terms of reference drafted and it will come back to council?
I'm happy to move in that direction, Chair.
Is there someone prepared to second that? Councillor Davidson? Yep. All those in favour?
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
And those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. It was a really rich discussion. Appreciate the views expressed. And Te Araha, have you clear on how we're moving forward on that one?
Yes, so are we also endorsing the recommendation though for the establishment of the trust board and seeking expressions of interest and applications at this stage? As per the report.
As per the resolution.
As per the report, yeah. Paul.
Through the chair, isn't that cart before the horse? I thought the terms of reference is going to determine what abilities we need on the trust board. Otherwise, if we go out now, we're going to end up with getting these funders from away because they've got the skills and ability to haul in the money, and that's going to overwhelm the call for an advocacy role. I think it needs to wait until the terms of reference.
I think they need the trust board to be able to assist with the writing of the terms and reference. It's the whole recommendation of the.
Well, I don't agree.
Can I just clarify, just for the minute secretary, the mover, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, the seconder, Councillor Davidson, did you move and second the resolutions as put as per the agenda in all three parts, inclusive of the selection appointment committee comprised of? And
I understood it just to be the terms of reference part.
So just to clarify, okay, I'll just clarify. The recommendation's broken down to three parts. The first is that the report be received. Do we all accept that that resolution's carried?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. The second one is that council endorse the establishment of the Hokitika Museum Trust Board and seeking expressions of interest / applications for suitable candidates. Was that moved and seconded?
Well, that's where we had that conversation around with advocacy and to ensure, I think, from what I can gather from what you're also saying, Paul, around it too, is to ensure that it's not just people from away that are funders be considered, but that we have a strong sense of purpose that, you know, locals are also brought onto that committee.
And through the chair, that's the expectation I would want to see reflected in terms of the selections and appointments committee, is also recommended that taking that into consideration based on the conversation around the table today.
Okay, so to move this forward then, could we insert after the council endorse the establishment of the Hokitika Museum Board, Trust Board, and following the adoption of a terms of reference, seeks expression of interest / applications of suitable candidates? Would that satisfy? Yes. So it's saying terms of reference first, and if we could get that at the next, I don't know, when we get that then we move to appointment process. Is
Yeah,
that
I
understood, Lee?
I just wonder whether the expression terms of reference is correct, whether you don't in fact mean constitution. Are we talking about the establishment of a constitution for the Trust Board?
We already have a draft constitution set aside, but we haven't brought it to this meeting because obviously with any constitution, it's not something you find in public format. But you still require the draft terms of reference as well for council, as I said earlier, in terms around the delegations. So that's something we can bring to council for the June meeting, and it won't impact in terms of our timeline because we weren't going to progress with this until after the adoption of the annual plan for 2022-2023.
Okay, that's excellent then. I think that's understood. So through Di and Susie, could we please have the addition of after Museum Trust Board in the second part of the recommendation, and following the adoption of the draft terms of reference by council, council seeks and carry on. And that way we will, in terms of a timeline, the report will be received today. Staff will undertake a drafting of the terms of reference. We will see that at the June meeting, Te Aroha.
Yes, well, I just wonder then, based on further comments from Paul Madgwick, it's just in terms of the Selection and Appointments Committee, is also allowing for one of our Runanga iwi representatives to be on that panel.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll just amend that to include.
Okay, and we amend the third resolution that the Selection and Appointments Committee comprise the Mayor, Council's Heritage Hokitika Committee representative. Who is that?
I think at the stage
Councillor Carruthers.
Councillor Carruthers, Deputy Mayor Carruthers, great. Yep. We'll just Chairman McCarfield, the Chief Executive.
No, not McCarfield. Someone from Potini Naito. I'm not sure who. I'll talk with.
Oh, okay. So someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
Potini Naitahu. Yeah. The Chief Executive and the Group Manager, Regulatory and Community Services.
Can we change the Mayor to Mayor or representative of the Mayor?
That is assumed. Okay. Yeah, it's assumed.
With the discussion with the amendments, I'll just check with the mover and the seconder, which is Deputy Mayor Carruthers and Councillor Davidson, whether they're happy with those amendments.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll put the resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? The resolution's carried. Thanks, team. We're a few moments away from afternoon tea. Could we have an administrative resolution as per the circulated agenda? It is an investiture, I think. No, that might be the wrong term. A road that needs to be have our stamp put on it, our seal. Grant Gibbs Road Development off Cron Street. Is there any comment from staff in relation to this administrative resolution?
Latham, I'll just stay out of this one. Conflict of interest.
And noting that Councillor Hartshorn abstained from discussion and vote in relation to this, please.
Something about Cron Street. Gibbs Road off Cron Street. Have we had something on this?
So this is basically using the road that's completed with the shovel-ready money into councils.
So the administrative resolution is that council is required to confirm its seal being affixed to the following document: consent pursuant to Part 5 Public Works Act 1983 for Grant Gibbs Road legalisation. Are we happy for council seal to be affixed to that? No, Paul.
Sorry, I don't have any problem with that. The transfer of the asset. It's not called Grant Gibb Road, though, is it?
No.
Right.
Cron Street.
Cron Street Extension.
Oh, that's a manager.
I'm just thinking about the previous council policy about naming.
Definitely not Grant Gibb Road.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Through the chair, if I could be excused, please. I'm actually somewhere else.
Yes, thank you very much for your participation today, Paul. Apology accepted. someone to move the administrative resolution, please?
Councillor Hart.
Councillor Hart, seconded. Councillor Neil, all those in favour?
Aye.
At this point, I'd like to thank the members of the public who have watched via Zoom, guest speakers, executive staff, staff reports, and councillors and deputy mayor for participation in the public section of the meeting. We'll now adjourn the meeting for a break, and we will then reconvene and move into public excluded. So thank you. And Di, could you please end the live stream?
Through you, Chair, could you move into public excluded?
Sure, we can do that prior to adjourning. That's fine. I'll move that we move into public excluded. Seconded, Councillor Neil. All those in favour?
Aye.